She sang in subway stations with a voice that could touch the sky. Now, the world is sad because a beautiful soul left too soon. Alice Tan Ridley, the strong mother of Oscar-nominated actress Gabourey Sidibe, died at 72. But what happened behind this sad goodbye will surprise you. From a beautiful funeral to the mystery that came after, this isn't just a farewell, it's a story that opens your eyes. When the world met Gabourey Sidibe in Precious, everyone saw a star. She was real, emotional, and unforgettable. But not many knew about the amazing woman behind her strength. Her mother, Alice Tan Ridley, was a gospel and soul singer who was a legend in her own way. Alice wasn't just a subway singer in New York City. She was special, pushing through tough times with every powerful note she sang. Now, at 72, Alice Tan Ridley has passed away. Tributes are coming from everywhere in the entertainment world and beyond. But as people gathered for her emotional funeral, stories started to appear. Some were beautiful, others were sad, and a few raised more questions than answers. In this story, we're not just remembering a beloved mother and singer. We're diving into Alice Tan Ridley's life, her music, her impact, and her complicated feelings about fame. We'll also talk about the quiet pain that even Gabourey rarely shared. You'll learn the emotional truth about the funeral, who came, who didn't, and what the world missed in the final moments of this incredible woman's life. Stay with us because this is more than a tribute. It's a story of music, motherhood, loss, and love. Before anyone knew Gabourey Sidibe, her mother, Alice Tan Ridley, was already performing. Not on big stages with bright lights, but on subway platforms in New York City. Her stage was the busy platforms of Times Square and Penn Station. Thousands of strangers stopped to listen as her voice broke through the noise. Alice wasn't just singing for money. She was pouring her heart into every word and note. Her voice, deep and full of gospel power, felt like it belonged in a grand concert hall. Many believed it did. Her versions of songs like Amazing Grace and I Will Always Love You brought applause and tears from commuters and tourists. Her presence pulled you in. You couldn't walk by without stopping. But what made Alice different was that she wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't trying to be a big star. She was surviving. After divorcing Gabourey's father, she became a single mother raising her children in New York. Music was her therapy and her way to earn a living. She sang to put food on the table. She sang to heal. She sang because it was the only way she knew to keep going. Here's where it gets interesting. Even with her powerful voice, raw talent, and deep emotion, Alice didn't get big record deals. She didn't get the spotlight she deserved, at least not until much later in life. Why not? What kept her out of the music world? Was it the industry, her choice to focus on motherhood, or something sadder? That's what we're about to explore in the next part, when her talent finally reached national TV and what happened when the cameras turned off. After years of singing in New York's subway tunnels, something surprising happened in 2010. Alice Tan Ridley took a chance. She auditioned for America's Got Talent. Picture this, a woman in her late 50s who had spent nearly 30 years singing underground, stepping into the bright lights of a national stage. She stood there humbly, with no fancy clothes or big team, just her voice and her story. The judges didn't know what to expect. Then she sang At Last by Etta James, and everything stopped. The audience cheered loudly. The judges were amazed. People across the country felt it, that deep feeling in her voice. You could hear every subway tunnel she ever sang in. You could hear the heartbreak, the sacrifice, and the single mother who never gave up. But here's the shocking part. Even with her incredible performance and the emotions it stirred, Alice didn't win. She didn't even make it to the finals. It left many wondering how someone with so much talent and soul could be overlooked again. Was it because of her age? Was the music industry too focused on young stars and looks? Or was it just bad luck? Her short time on America's Got Talent brought her some attention. She finally got some of the recognition she deserved, but it didn't last long. Interviews came and went, headlines disappeared, and soon Alice was back in the shadows, singing not for fame, but for her heart. Still, in the hearts of millions, she left a mark. She showed that real talent doesn't always come from pop stars on the radio. Sometimes it comes from a mother who just needed a microphone and the courage to share her gift, no matter how long it took. But here's where it gets even more emotional. While Alice was finding her voice in the subway and on TV, her daughter she saw the pain, strength, and the perseverance. Gabourey wasn't just raised by a mother, she was raised by a fighter, a woman who wouldn't let the world silence her. Gabourey wasn't just the star of Precious, she was the daughter of a woman who had already faced life's hardest battles. What many don't know is that while the world cheered Gabourey's rise to fame, Alice was always there, not hidden, but as the root of her strength. Let me tell you something, Alice didn't just teach Gabourey how to survive, she showed her how to live. She taught her to be fearless in a world that often tells black women to be small. She encouraged her to speak loudly in places where people didn't expect her to be. Above all, she taught her that her voice mattered. While the public saw Gabourey becoming a symbol of body positivity and honesty, the truth is Alice was the original bold spirit. She never changed her voice, her style, or her heart for anyone. She sang with the same passion in a noisy subway as she did on the America's Got Talent stage. That same honesty flowed into her daughter's soul. But here's the sad twist. Despite their close bond, there were years of quiet struggles between them. Alice once dreamed of fame, music deals, and recording studios. But life had other plans. plans. Raising a daughter alone, working hard underground, and facing disappointment year after year wasn't easy. Sometimes watching Gabourey walk red carpets while she stayed mostly unknown brought mixed feelings. There was pride, deep pride, but also sadness for the career she might have had if things were different. Still, there was never jealousy, only love and admiration. Alice always said, "Gabourey made it possible for both of us to be seen. She speaks and the world listens." And Gabourey never forgot where her strength came from. In interviews, she talked about her mother's sacrifices, how Alice kept singing even when people ignored her, and how she pushed forward when everything said to stop. When Alice's health started to get worse in recent years, Gabourey was there quietly without making a big show. But here's where it gets even more emotional and surprising. In the final months of Alice's life, the public didn't know what was happening. Gabourey kept it private. There were no Instagram posts or sad tweets, just silence, a sacred silence. Behind the scenes, Gabourey was flying back and forth, working with doctors, managing hospice care, and keeping her mother's dignity safe. It was a time of quiet heartbreak, whispered prayers, bedside memories, and final "I love yous." On the day Alice passed, Gabourey didn't speak publicly, not at first. Why? Because this loss wasn't for the world to see. It was personal. It was sacred. This was the woman who gave her everything. When Gabourey finally spoke days later, her words were short but powerful. They shook the internet. "She was my first home, my first music, my first courage. I will never stop hearing her voice." It wasn't just the end of a life. It was the closing of a chapter, a quiet, beautiful chapter that shaped Gabourey's strength all along. But this story doesn't end with a goodbye, because what happened next took the world by surprise. You could feel something special in the air, something unspoken. When the world learned that Alice Tan Ridley had passed away at 72, the response wasn't just sadness, it was overwhelming. Let me set the scene. In a quiet chapel in New York City, friends, family, and fellow performers gathered to say goodbye. It wasn't a big stadium or concert hall, but it felt just as important, maybe even more. Every corner of that room held a memory. Every voice that spoke her name carried a story. Gabourey, usually full of energy and quick wit, walked in wearing deep royal blue, Alice's favorite color. She wasn't a celebrity that day. She was a daughter grieving the woman who raised her with music, fire, and endless love. Here's the amazing part. This wasn't a typical funeral. It turned into something much bigger, a celebration, a revival, a final moment of strength. The people who came weren't famous stars with big deals or private jets. They were the subway performers Alice had sung with for years. They didn't come for attention. They came for her. They sang the same gospel songs she used to sing underground, their voices breaking with emotion as the room filled with grief and joy. Then something unexpected happened. Jennifer Hudson, yes, that Jennifer Hudson walked up quietly, took a deep breath, and sang "His Eye is on the Sparrow." It was the same song Alice sang on America's Got Talent, the one that got a standing ovation and made Sharon Osbourne cry years before. But this time, it wasn't a performance. It was a prayer, a goodbye. Let me tell you, everyone was crying, even people who never met Alice. Why? Because this wasn't just about her voice. It was about everything she stood for. She was every mother who never got her moment, every woman who chose sacrifice over stardom, every soul who kept their gift alive even when no one noticed. Gabourey tried to speak but couldn't. Emotions took over. Instead, she sat in the front row, holding a handwritten letter she had placed in her mother's casket. We may never know what it said, but that's the kind of love they had. Some words aren't meant for the world. Here's where it gets even more powerful. Outside the church, hundreds of fans, performers, and regular people gathered. Many were people Alice had sung for in the subway over the years. Candles and handwritten notes. One woman held a sign that said, "She sang for us when no one else did." Another said, "Your voice saved me on my darkest day. Rest easy, queen of the underground." And that's what she was, a queen, not of Hollywood or music charts, but of something deeper, the hearts of people who had nothing and found light in her music. In a moment no one expected, the crowd outside started singing together, gospel, soul, and blues. It wasn't planned, but it was raw and beautiful. Even in death, Alice's voice was still echoing, still bringing people together, still lifting spirits. But what happened after the funeral shook social media and gave Alice the worldwide recognition she never had while alive. You might think the story would fade after the funeral, like so many news stories do. But this wasn't just another story, and Alice Tan Ridley wasn't just another name. What happened after the casket was lowered and the last note of "His Eye is on the Sparrow" faded was something no one saw coming. It was like the world finally realized what it had lost. Tributes poured in from everywhere, and I'm not talking about a few kind words. It was a huge wave of grief, love, and late admiration that surprised even Gabourey. Let me tell you about one beautiful tribute from someone unexpected. Viola Davis, the Oscar-winning actress, posted a heartfelt video. She said, "Alice Ridley's voice was the kind you don't forget. Raw, pure, and full of soul. She showed us talent doesn't need fancy studios, just truth, pain, and faith." Then came Whoopi Goldberg, who shared a story on The View. She said, "I passed Alice in the subway once. I didn't know her name, but I stopped and thought, this woman is singing like she's in front of God himself." Turns out, she was. That's the thing. Alice never needed a spotlight. She was the light. And now, that light was finally being seen and shared. But what stunned everyone one next was what Gabourey did to honor her mother, something that would keep Alice's voice alive forever and give other women like her the chance she never fully had. Gabourey's bold move came 2 weeks after the funeral. She posted something on Instagram that went viral, a black and white photo of Alice smiling with her eyes closed, holding a microphone. The caption read, "She gave everything to music and nothing to herself, so I'm making sure her voice and voices like hers are never ignored again." She announced the Ridley Foundation for Underground Artists, a non-profit to support overlooked musicians, especially older women, street performers, and unrecognized singers who never got their moment. Here's the powerful part. Gabourey released unreleased recordings of her mother singing gospel classics and jazz standards. These were songs Alice recorded in her apartment with a simple microphone, never meant for fame, just for love. Within days, one track, her cover of "Odd Change Is Gonna Come," started trending on TikTok. It wasn't teens dancing. Creators used the sound to share stories of their mothers, grandmothers, and loved ones they'd lost. Alice's voice became the sound of grief, healing, and inspiration. Think about that. A woman who once sang underground, unnoticed by the world, was now the voice of a generation's mourning and strength. But it gets even deeper. Gabourey shared in a podcast that during Alice's final months, her mother kept saying one thing over and over: "Don't let them forget me." And Gabourey made sure they didn't. In one of the most emotional moments, Gabourey shared a voicemail from her mom, recorded just weeks before she passed. In it, Alice said, "Baby girl, don't cry for me when I'm gone. Just remember to sing. Keep the music going. That's how I'll know you're okay." Let that sink in. It wasn't about fame or money. It was always about the music, the love, and making someone feel something. Alice Tan Ridley may have left this world, but she didn't leave quietly. Her life, her voice, and her story are now louder than ever, not in subway tunnels, but in hearts around the world. There's a special beauty in how Alice Tan Ridley lived and how she left us. She didn't chase fame or applause. She stood on subway platforms in the cold and noise and sang. She gave her soul freely to strangers because the music inside her had to go somewhere. Now that music has gone where it always belonged, into the hearts of millions. Alice's death wasn't just the end of a life, it was the start of a legacy. We began this story talking about the sad moment when news broke that Gabourey Sidibe's mother had passed, but now that you know who Alice really was, not just Gabourey's mom, but a legend in her own right, it's clear the world didn't just lose a mother. It lost a voice of pure, honest truth. And Gabourey didn't just bury her mother. She brought her back to life through foundations, tributes, and a movement that ensures women like Alice will never be ignored again. Here's what I want you to remember. If you've ever felt invisible, unheard, too late for your dreams, or overlooked by a world that only celebrates the already famous, think of Alice Tan Ridley. Remember her voice, remember her story, and most of all, remember that it's never too late to be seen or heard. If this story touched you even a little, do something with it. Like this story so others can hear about Alice's journey. Comment your favorite moment from her life, or share a tribute to someone in your life whose light wasn't seen. Subscribe if you believe in honoring the voices that came before us and those still fighting to be heard. Let's make sure Alice's voice never fades. Some voices were never meant to be background noise. They were meant to change the world.